afternoon. Today I'm talking about being non-judgmental. I'm going to tell you, just to put it kind of straight, I'm going to tell you some stories. I like telling stories. Some stories that kind of get you thinking about what happens when we sort of act in a non-judgmental way, and some things the other way round. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I'm no saint. I just like to paint that picture. I'm no saint. I don't get this right all the time. But it's something I believe is fundamental in youth and community work, is coming to people and treating them in a way where there's no judgments made before we start the engagement with them. There's going to be a few images. You might have to squint a bit to try and work out what on earth they are, but that's part of the process. When I was 13, my father had a massive heart attack. Now, this may not sound that shocking. He survived. I'll just tell you that now, so you're not getting all doom and gloomy. But he was the 10th person in the UK to have a bypass. So it was not now you're in hospital and you're out in a week. Then it was a 3-month in intensive care after he'd had the operation. The night before he went in, it was very sudden. He sat me down at the kitchen table. I've got 2 sisters who are older. He sat me down, I was 13 just, and said, "Son, I don't think I'm going to make this. You need to look after the house. You're the man in charge. You've got to look after your mum, you've got to look after your sisters." Now, at 13, that completely and utterly freaked me out. My reaction was to rebel, to bury myself, not talk to anybody. I got very angry. I went completely the other way. And as a result, in my teenage years, people said things like this. The adults that came across me said, "You're a waste of space. You're never going to make something of yourself. The only place," especially teachers this was, "the only place you're going to end up is in prison." That was the kind of mantra that went through my teenage life. That judgment follows me right through till today, those words. As I stood there waiting to come on, I still have to keep in check that actually I can stand in front of you and I can do things okay. They still have an impact. Young people that I work with in Islington are judged in so many different ways. And out on the street, one of the main things that happens is young people get stopped and searched. Some young people, up to 7 times in one day, would stop and search. And that was in the space of 3/4 of an hour, walking down the road with their friends. Stop, search, stop, search. The picture that you can see there was after a very frustrating day. That's how I sketched to get my thoughts out. This young person, there was a group of people standing, looking out at what was going on the other side of the road, and the group got bigger and bigger, kind of as it does when there's something interesting going on. And the conversations from all ages were like, "Well, he's clearly guilty. I bet it's drugs. I bet he's done a phone snatch. Or it could be he's nicked a bike." And there was all these judgments being passed on this young person. But the reality was, that young person, with those 3 policemen standing around him, was the victim of the crime. The shocking thing was, the first thing the police did was stop him and search him. We pass judgment on young people, or society does, in many, many ways. This is another one. I don't think you can see the title. This is entitled Friday Night Stereotype. This is another Friday night. And in the media, often, over and over and over again, young people are particularly talked about in violent, drunken behaviour. Now, I travel on the tube on a Friday night and a Saturday evening. It can be quite interesting, but it's never young people. And when you look at the statistics behind it, the statistics with these drunken brawls, they start at 25 to 35 is the average age. When you look at the hospital stats, it's the older age group that this is for. So again, young people being judged unfairly, incorrectly by the media. These all build pressures. They all build pressures on young people. And it's how do we cope? I coped by rebelling. I pushed the boundaries. I really did push the boundaries. I was thrown out of Boys Brigade on more times than I can count. I don't think that's really possible. I was thrown out of my youth club, well, several youth clubs. I was thrown out, I'm slightly ashamed of this one, of my Sunday school. And many other things. Some of them took me back and threw me out again, and some just said, "No, you're not coming back." But what those people did is they based their judgment on the behaviour and didn't look to see what was going on below the surface. Can we be non-judgmental? Is it actually possible? We've had this big debate going around our office for the last few weeks. Can we be non-judgmental? One of my colleagues says it's not at all possible. We have to judge. We always judge. It's in our nature. We will always judge. And I think to a point he's probably right, but we can consciously make a decision to try and change that, to do things in a different way, to actually get to know someone, look for the story. There's lots of stories. When you hear a young person is dealing drugs and the mum has turned a blind eye, she knows blatantly well what's going on. It's very easy, and the thing I hear more often than not is those young people know what they're doing. They've only got themselves to blame, they should be locked up. That is the common response we get. But when you dig a little, when you actually get to know that family and you realise the money that he's earning is putting the food on the table so they can eat, it doesn't make the drug dealing right, but it changes your perspective of how you have to look at the young person and how you start to judge that situation. During the 7/7 bombings, which wasn't a pleasant time, I commute on the tube for about an hour every day to get into work and back. And that morning I sat on a train that was delayed heading to King's Cross. Very fortunately, that's where I should have been at the time the bombs were going off. The next morning I was back on the tube to do my daily commute. And for the next month, 2 months, sitting on the tube was a really, really tense situation. And what was shocking, we've got a massive mosque in Morden, it's huge. What was shocking is when particularly a Muslim guy got on the train carriage, particularly if he had a rucksack with him, people would get off. People would make verbal abusive comments against them. And if a lady got on wearing a burqa, it was the same process. People would be rude, people would really be insulting towards them, judging them on this terrorist attack and what had gone on. So I made a decision that I would talk to these people and just sit next to these people, ask them how they're doing. And actually I've made some lifelong friends in the process. But one of the things that stood out for me is some ladies said, what I want is for people to see the real me, which is what this slide is entitled, Through the Media Blur, and it is blurred deliberately, can you see the real me? So we need to just learn to try and keep ourselves in check. If we feel ourselves judging, we need to try and stop and just think. It's the old adage of walking in each other's shoes. I'm just going to end with one last story, again on the tube. I got on the tube, I normally miss the rush hour, but this one day I had to be home early. And I got on the tube and it was hot, a bit like today, it was sweaty and it was crowded. And I always go to the end carriage because you can normally get a seat. And I got on, got my seat, and just as the doors were about to go, like they do, on got this guy that was homeless, clearly homeless. No word of a lie, he looked like Captain Birdseye. He had the big white beard, the kind of fisherman's mac and hat in that sunshine. And the first thing that hit you was the smell. He clearly hadn't been able to shower for a long time. But again, what was shocking is everybody in this carriage, he came on and he was cursing the world and his unseen demons. He was swearing and cursing, if you move, I'll kill you, but that's the polite version. And everybody went to the ends of the carriage. Some visibly held their noses. And this guy was getting more and more irate as they did. And I'd had a long day. I'm not, as I said, I'm no saint. So I sat in my chair, the only one there. Whole carriage now empty with people just poured up either end of the carriages. And he came and he sat down next to me. He said, you all right? I went, yeah, you? And we had a little chat. He said, you got a fag? I said, sorry mate, I don't smoke, but if I had one, I'd let you have one. He said, I know you would. And his cursing stopped because people had stopped judging him. His cursing stopped, and we talked every stop all the way to Morden. It's the last stop on the Northern Line that I go to. And we talked all the way. And as I got off, he looked me in the eye and he said, stick with me, kid, you're always guaranteed a seat. I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you very much.